I've been noticing a very popular argument that has been trending online and also in right-wing media outlets that essentially argues that what's really more important now is the economy and keeping businesses operational. Basically, they're saying get back to work. Stop worrying about being infected. Get back to work, slave. And so they say, what's more dangerous is a crashing economy. So many people are going to die. And I heard some conservative saying, I think it was Michael Knowles, or I think that was his name. I heard this guy saying that the effects of a crashing economy is going to be far worse than this virus. He said tens of thousands of people will die from drug overdose because they're so depressed. And thousands and thousands of people are going to die from suicide because they are so depressed. And I'm thinking, this is the very first time I have seen a conservative tell us that we should be worried about drug overdose and suicide. Because conservatives are always the ones talking about being morally responsible and having good moral character and virtue. And someone with good moral character would never overdose on drugs and never commit suicide because, they should have faith in God. And if you have faith in God, you'll never commit suicide. And for the first time ever in my life, I see a conservative talking about how we should be worried about people killing themselves and people overdosing on drugs. And that's why we need to stop worrying so much about this virus, which is being overhyped, and keep the economy operational. Don't worry about it, guys. This virus, it may kill you, but what matters is the economy. What matters is a happy CEO. Happy CEO, happy life. Unless, of course, you get infected with COVID-19 or some other pandemic that will be in the air or in your neighbor's immune system, that the conservatives will tell you not to worry about because get to work, slave. That's what matters. And it's really almost as if they care more about GDP than human life. It's not really as if. It really is the case. They care more about corporate power than they do human life. It's amazing that this is coming from people who for decades have boasted about being pro-life. I am pro-life. The murder of the unborn, the murder of the innocent. And yet these same people are saying, get to work, slave. Doesn't matter how many people die. What matters is the economy. Are these people really pro-life? Apparently not, because they would rather have you die than the economy go down. Now, I understand that the economy is going to suffer and that the consequences of this is going to be bad. But we are in a very difficult predicament in which if we push people back to work, they're going to get infected and you are going to have economic problems because all these people are going to be home because they're sick. And the other situation in which you close down businesses, you close down places where people crowd, and you are inevitably going to have economic problems. It is a situation where people are going to suffer no matter what. But because we do not understand COVID-19 in its totality, we have to take proper measures in order to prevent our medical infrastructure from crashing. Because if the medical infrastructure crashes, then you'll have even worse problems because hospitals will be completely overcrowded. And then people who have other conditions will be worse off because they won't be able to get that medical attention that they'll need. And they'll say, oh, hospitals aren't overcrowded. Yeah, that's because we're quarantining. That's the whole point of quarantine. Anyway, conservatives are the types of people, they love to talk about how, and liberals are also guilty of this as well, don't get me wrong, but conservatives love to talk about facts. They love to use that word a lot. Facts, facts, facts. I'm interested in facts. I'm not interested in feelings or emotions. I'm interested in facts. And they'll say, look, you see, these Muslim people, they're killing people. You see, Islam is bad. You see, we just demonstrated that. How come liberals can't see that? Aren't liberals blind? Don't they have eyes? And look, some Mexican guy killed somebody over here. See, there's a national emergency in the border. You see, Trump is right. There's a national emergency. You see? Facts. So conservatives love to point to things that are obvious, right? To prove their point. And yes, we should all do these things, we should point to the obvious in order to substantiate what we are trying to say. That is a given. So let's look to something that we can actually see, something that is actually happening right in front of us. Let's look at a case of someone who didn't want to shut down a place where a lot of people crowd up and a lot of people are now infected. The governor of South Dakota, Kristi Noem, she did not want to close down the giant pork processing plant that they have in Sioux Falls, South Dakota. This is the largest pork processing plant in the country, and she didn't want to close it down. So this is what happened. What happened is South Dakota now has the largest cluster of coronavirus cases in the country. And most of the cases are related to this pork processing plant. It gives a whole new meaning to the argument against eating pork. Well, not really. But you'll have people who would say things like that. So anyway, it says here, this is an article from CBS News. It says the number of South Dakota residents who have tested positive for coronavirus has surpassed 1,100. And more than half of those cases have some connection to the Smithfield Foods pork processing plant in Sioux Falls, South Dakota. And I've been to Sioux Falls, South Dakota. It looks like freaking Siberia. It says here, this comes as Governor Kristi Noem reiterated Tuesday that she won't be ordering people to stay home amid the coronavirus pandemic. So, go to work, not ordering a shutdown. So much for the love of capital. Now you have a bunch of workers who are sick, hundreds of workers who are sick. I mean, even the state of Texas has done some sort of shutdown, and the state of Texas loves business, especially when it gets business from Democrat states like California. So it says here, health officials said Wednesday that 180 more people tested positive for COVID-19 in the last day, bringing the statewide total to 1,168 confirmed cases. Of those, 934 cases were in Minnehaha County. I'm not sure if I'm pronouncing that correctly. I think it's one of those towns that have a Native American name. Minnehaha County. 934 cases are in this county. It says here this is actually the location of the Smithfield Foods plant, making the site one of the largest known clusters of COVID-19 cases in the U.S. One of the largest. I think I said the largest, but it's one of the largest. As of Wednesday, 644 people with connections to the plant were infected, including 518 employees. According to New York Times and KELO-TV data analysis, as of Wednesday, the number of localized cases at the Smithfield plant made it the top hotspot in the country, with Chicago's Cook County Jail and the USS Theodore Roosevelt close behind. So it does have the highest amount of clusters, or the biggest cluster of infection. Despite the numbers, Noem said she would not issue a stay-at-home order for Minnehaha and nearby Lincoln counties, as Sioux Falls Mayor Paul Tenhaken requested. So the mayor of Sioux Falls, Paul Tenhaken, requested that this plant be shut down, and eventually it had to be shut down. And there is an article on NPR talking about this. It says, Paul Tenhaken, the 42-year-old mayor of Sioux Falls, South Dakota, said it wasn't easy getting the world's top pork producer to shut down one of its biggest plants. It was tense. And it says here, Tenhaken, blah, 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 blah. It says here that the infection was spreading most rapidly among the 3,700 workers at a pork processing plant owned by Smithfield Foods on the banks of the Big Sioux River, just north of the city's center. Most of the workers at the plant are immigrants. They speak 26 different languages. Maybe that's why they don't give a damn. They're not Americans, they're immigrants. Tenhaken said, quote, this thing jumped out of a light socket. Dozens of workers were testing positive for the virus. And the mayor said, quote, we need to see a temporary closure, not only to calm the community, but to ensure that the safety of your employees is priority number one. Isn't that what they always say? The safety of our employees is our number one priority. Apparently, that's all a bunch of bullshit. So it says here that the mayor drafted a letter to Smithfield's CEO calling on the company to shut down the plant, et cetera, et cetera. And yeah, so eventually they had to get this plant shut down. They had to. The mayor pushed the company to do it, and it was done. So the governor, Kristi Noem, she's like, I don't want to shut anything down, but they had to shut it down anyway. So there goes the whole strategy of, well, just keep everything open, get the economy going. Well, if you do that, you have so many people sick that you have to shut the company down anyway. So what was the whole point of having it open? It just really goes to show you corporate elitism, how much they really don't give a damn about you. It's amazing that conservatives, I just love this. Conservatives for decades have been saying, look at these Democrats, these liberals, they don't give a damn about the common people. They don't see you as equal to them. They think that they're superior to you. What do you call this? What do you call this? Governor, Republican of South Dakota, Kristi Noem, doesn't give a damn about employees. And then when people were saying, hey, you should shut it down, she said, no, I'm not shutting it down, even though hundreds of people were getting infected. Doesn't that really reveal how Republicans also see you, the average person? They don't give a damn about you. And it's very interesting. We can go back to history and we can see similar patterns of behavior. 1918 pandemic, 1918 influenza pandemic. People are saying today, and this is a really a stupid thing to say, and anyone who believes this, you guys really need to get to the facts, because if you really care about facts, you'll stop believing this. This whole misconception that what we are seeing as far as the quarantine laws go is unprecedented. It's unprecedented. They're shutting down churches and stores and shops and factories, and it's unprecedented. It's unprecedented. It's not unprecedented. This happened in 1918 during the influenza pandemic because the United States government has the authority to do things like this in order to protect the society. Just as we have the authority to do certain things that would be considered draconian if the United States was in the middle of a war or considered to be under attack. This is a microscopic enemy. And so draconian measures need to be imposed because an invisible enemy is actually a lot more dangerous than a visible one. And something that can kill you, that spreads through coughs and sneezes and human touch and even touching the surfaces on tables and boxes, that requires a lot of effort to defeat. So 1918 influenza pandemic, there were quarantine rules. And they were enacted throughout the country. In some parts of the country, people were quarantined for months. In most parts of the country, the quarantine lasted for weeks. Pennsylvania, in the city of Philadelphia, the capital, in the city of Philadelphia, in the state of Pennsylvania, the pandemic hit. And the health director of Philadelphia, his name was Wilmer Cruiser, I think his name was. Yeah, Wilmer Cruzen. This guy was the health director in 1918, and he knew that this thing was spreading. He knew that a lot of sailors in the U.S. Navy, they were getting this infection. He knew that the U.S. military had canceled its recruitment program, its draft program to get more soldiers to fight in the First World War because it was spreading amongst the soldiers. Cruzen refused to affirm or to exhort quarantine rule. In fact, there was a World War I parade that was scheduled in the city of Philadelphia, and before the parade was done, before the parade happened, Cruzen said that he is 100% certain that this influenza flu is not a serious threat. He said it's just a common flu. He actually said this. He said, it's just a common flu, guys. Don't worry about it. The parade happened. Around 250,000 people went to the parade. In a few days, every single bed in every single hospital in Philadelphia was filled. Every single bed in every Philadelphia hospital was filled with people who got the influenza virus. And in a few days, thousands of people died. This thing spread from Philadelphia. It went to different states. it went all the way to Boston, and you had all these soldiers who were getting it, and they spread it everywhere they went. They went to New Orleans, they went to Quebec, they went to Chicago, they went all over the place, and they spread it everywhere they went. And the war played a huge role in spreading this disease, and it killed, worldwide, it killed around 100 million people. And they called it the Spanish flu, but it actually started in the United States. So we really should be calling it the American flu, for all of you people who insist on saying that coronavirus is the Chinese virus. And so they enacted quarantine rules. Churches were closed down. In fact, in Denver, Colorado, the pastors in that city told the government, we insist that the churches be closed. The pastors didn't say, oh, we're being persecuted by the state. Oh my God, this virus is overblown. We're going to go to the church anyway, and it doesn't matter how many people we infect, even though, yeah, we're actually pro-life. No, the pastors in those days told the government in Denver, we are actually going to close down the churches. We insist on the churches being closed down. And even when the government said, hey, you know, the quarantine rules can be kind of loosened up, it can kind of be lessened in its severity, the churches said, the pastors said, no, we insist on the churches remaining closed for the health of the society. There were a couple of synagogues, I want to say in Cleveland, that actually rebelled against quarantine rule, and they did their Seder or their temple services, and the police had to go over there and bust them. And what do we see today? We see Orthodox Jews breaking quarantine. Some rabbi died. They want to do a funeral in the middle of the street. They're doing the same thing in Israel. The Israeli authorities, and you know what I'm saying isn't anti-Semitic, because the Israelis are also having trouble with the Orthodox community not obeying, not complying with quarantine rule. That's why the highest rate of infection in Israel is amongst the Orthodox Jews. The whole point of me telling you guys this is that the quarantine is working. We are seeing the line flattening because of quarantine. And people are going to bring up H1N1. During H1N1, we didn't have a quarantine policy, and I want to say over 12,000 Americans died from H1N1. We have quarantine, and coronavirus has already surpassed the amount of people, surpassed the number of deaths that H1N1 caused. So if we didn't have quarantine, it would be a hell of a lot worse than it is now. So quarantine is necessary. And here's the thing, I'll finish with this. During the quarantine policies of the 1918 pandemic, the influenza pandemic, St. Louis had a lot of cases, and then they did quarantine, and then the cases began to drop. Right when St. Louis, Missouri, right when St. Louis got rid of its quarantine procedure, there was a second spike. And anytime a state got rid of its quarantine procedure, there was a second spike. In places where they continued quarantine procedure, there was no second spike. So if we just put everyone back to work, we're going to have a bunch of sick employees. They're going to stay home. They're going to spread it to more people, and your businesses are going to have to shut down anyway. So this whole Republican fantasy of, we'll just open up the economy, it's going to be great. It's a fantasy. Anyway, I hope you guys have enjoyed this message. Hope you guys have learned something from this message. You guys just heard some theology. God bless.